Kalam podcast is made possible through listeners like you. If you enjoy listening to Kalam, please subscribe to the show in whatever podcast application you're listening to right now, and please give us a rating. It helps other people find out about us. And if you'd like to support the show with a small donation, consider signing up to Kalam podcast on Patreon for just $3 a month. In addition to supporting the show, you'll gain access to lots of great bonus content. Go to patreon.com and search for Kalam Podcast, or go straight to patreon.com/Kalam Podcast. That's patreon.com/Kalam Podcast. Now, on to the show. Hello and welcome to the 6th installment of Kalam Digest, our weekly news summary here on Kalam Podcast. We're recording live on Tuesday the 17th of September at around 7:30 p.m. Swedish time. I'm sure everyone listening now will have heard of the dramatic developments in Lebanon. I don't think we can call it anything other than a terrorist attack. Almost 3,000 casualties, 200 critically wounded, 9 killed, including a young girl. We're going to get to that. That's our main story. But before we get to that, I'd first like to welcome Sam to the show. Welcome, Sam.
Thank you, Edgar.
And I thought that we would rip off some other news stories, because this is not the only thing happening in the world, obviously, but as it concerns us, maybe the most crucial. But to begin with, some headlines from last week. 83% of the food needed in Gaza is now being blocked by Israel. Sam, do you want to say just a few words about that?
Yeah, well, it basically means the Gaza population is surviving on a fourth or a fifth of what they would normally get in terms of nutrition, in terms of calorie intake. This is obviously unacceptable. It's just to not forget that the slow starving of Gaza is going on in the background to all the stories on more spectacular topics in terms of international politics, etc., that we cover. This is the basic situation on the ground. Everyone is basically starving in Gaza.
Yeah. On to our next story. The UN General Assembly will be voting on a resolution to demand that Israel withdraw from all occupied territories within 12 months. This is a significant development, isn't it, Sam?
It's significant, of course, in terms of the shifting opinion or public opinion or in the West or globally on Israel. This is not kind of resolution that would be brought to the table just a year ago. But on the other hand, of course, one might question to what extent the General Assembly has any power to even diplomatically push through what they decide. But of course, in terms of Israel's falling popularity globally, it's very significant.
Yeah, it's not the Security Council, but just before we move on to our next headline, when will this vote be taking place, Sam?
It's supposed to be taking place this evening, but we might guess that it will be postponed because of what's going on in Lebanon for emergency discussions. At the latest tomorrow is what's been said during the day today.
Our next headline is the UN Special Rapporteur Francesca Albanese warns that Israel will become a permanent pariah in the international community. I don't think we need a comment necessarily for that. Friend of the show, no. I guess we could say. We've been trying to get her. I have been in touch with her people, and hopefully we'll get her on the show shortly. Francesca Albanese doing important work.
One of the most outspoken people out of everyone, basically writing, reporting, or discussing the topics in Israel right now.
Yeah,
absolutely important.
Yeah, a fearless worker, to say the least. On to our next headline. In the West Bank, ongoing attacks have killed dozens during the past week, including personnel from UNRWA, and the total number of Palestinians killed in the West Bank since October 7th has now reached 700 people, killed obviously by Israeli settlers and military. Next headline, the Yemeni rebel group, the Houthis, have attacked Israel with a new kind of missile, which it seems cannot be intercepted by the Israeli defense systems. How significant is that, Sam?
Well, we do not know how many of these new missiles or rockets that they possess, but if they would have a number of such missiles which could strike Israel without the so-called Iron Dome being able to intercept them, that would obviously heighten the tension and the risk for Israeli civilian casualties and military casualties inside Israel, which is, as we've discussed many times before, is what would actually push Israel probably towards reaching a ceasefire agreement. So both heightens the tension and the risk for regional war, of course, and drastically undermines Israel's will to fight if it would be that they have more than a couple of them, so to speak, that they could carry out more major attacks.
Right. Okay, so let's move on to our main story today. Obviously, the wide-scale attack in Lebanon. Like I said in the beginning of the show, the exact number as of recording right now is 2,750 wounded. 9 people have been killed, including an 8-year-old girl, and 200 of those wounded are now in critical condition. This after a major wide-scale attack against Hezbollah members in Lebanon. Essentially, Hezbollah members' pagers that were in their pockets, which is their preferred means of communication since Israel can easily hack into smartphones. These pagers simultaneously exploded. And these weren't, some small like battery fire explosions. These were military grade explosions, which left very severe injuries in many cases. This comes after a quite major announcement from the Israeli war cabinet, essentially, where Israel announced it would expand its war goals to include returning the displaced Israelis to northern Israel. I mean, I think around 100,000 Israelis have been forced to leave their homes and are internally displaced in Israel because of the ongoing escalatory sort of confrontation between Hezbollah and Israel since October 7th. That decision was made or announced today, and then just a few hours later, this major attack hits Lebanon. And this is not just Beirut, this is all over Lebanon, primarily Beirut and south of that, but lots of different locations. There is complete chaos on the streets of Beirut and in many other Lebanese cities in the south. It's sort of unfathomable. I don't understand it. Sam, do you have any insights on how this terrorist attack, we have to call it a terrorist attack, really, because, I mean, children die. Israel could not, this is an indiscriminate attack because this happened among civilians. But do you have any idea, Sam, of how this could be possible?
I have no idea about the technology involved in this. To me, it's hard to understand how they would be able to pinpoint these pagers. Perhaps if they managed to actually get into a shipment of pagers or something, or if they just if it's something more complex technological solution. I don't know. I don't think we're good enough at computer sciences to unravel.
I'm not.
Unpack that question.
I'll just quickly add on the technical thing. I've been watching TV and the news all evening, and the one plausible thing I did see was that Hezbollah had gotten a new shipment of pagers recently, and if Israel were able to get a hold of the supplier of these pagers and disarm the sort of safety valve on these machines and then hack into them and cause this overheating and the explosion of a battery, seems like the most plausible thing to me. It seems unplausible that they would like plant a bomb in thousands of pagers that they knew were going to, I don't know.
That seems very improbable, yes. That they would be planting actual explosives inside them, yeah. But regardless, I mean, if it's a terrorist attack or not, they will obviously claim that it's an attack on Hezbollah, and therefore it's a legitimate military attack.
Israel,
but as you said, children, civilians, etc., have been killed. So if they in any way want to claim the moral high ground, which of course, given what we've seen in Gaza, is already, let's say, difficult, they will have a problem with that. On the other hand, I think it's fascinating because it's clearly Israel moving into this kind of asymmetrical warfare all out. We already know that they don't respect national boundaries, that they've been bombing locations inside Syria, Iran, Iraq, etc. So this is something they've been doing for a long time. But using these, I mean, plainly non-state actor technologies or modes of waging war, or what they want to call it, is clearly another step towards letting go, so let's say, of all kind of rules of engagement. If we look at Gaza, for example, it's still been, we all know that Israel has for a long time had to develop anti-terrorist or anti-insurgency techniques to strike at a kind of enemies working with the asymmetrical methods. But this is another step where they're just taking over basically the whole idea of just indiscriminately bombing civilians or using the asymmetrical kinds of warfare such as this. We need to remember that this comes right after, as you said, Netanyahu and Gallant, the defense minister, proclaiming that they have included attacking Lebanon, basically, or an invasion of Lebanon within the war goals. As you said, they frame it as allowing displaced Israelis to return to the north, while also they are demanding of Hezbollah and the Lebanese that they establish a security zone, they call it, or a zone from which all civilians, etc., will be moved in southern Lebanon. So it's basically they're demanding that Lebanese is displaced instead of Israelis. At the moment, I think it's somewhere around 70,000 Israelis are displaced and 90,000 Lebanese people. But the strikes have been ongoing back and forth, but it's been clear up until recently that Israel does not really think it can manage to do let's say, a three-front warfare with the West Bank, Lebanon, and Gaza. But they seem to have been leaving that behind. We were planning on this morning, before this whole pager attack thing happened, to focus this discussion on the question of whether or not Gallant, the defense minister, is going to be forced out or not. It seems now that he is staying in his position, at least for the time being, and probably because he's been an outspoken critic of the idea that Israel can defeat Hezbollah in Lebanon. But now it seems clear that the, let's say, ultra right wing, I mean, the whole government is an extreme right wing government, but the ultra right wing of the extreme right wing government of Israel has taken kind of control of this issue. They've been demanding an invasion of Lebanon for a long time. So it's going to be some kind of all-out war with Lebanon is very probable.
Yeah, I mean, so essentially what you're saying is that the defense minister, Yoav Gallant, who previous to today might have left the government because of his differences with the, extreme right on invading Lebanon, because he just kind of looks at it rationally saying, I don't think we can do this, guys. He's kind of been roped into taking part of it because Israel now has taken this step and resigning in the midst of this complete chaotic escalation would be seen as kind of traitorous, I guess.
But I guess so. I mean, also it's perhaps this is just the first step of an actual invasion, or at least, I mean, it's seriously a very serious escalation of the conflict with Lebanon. So in any way, the fact that they're carrying this out means that Gallant is not leaving. I would say I'm pretty certain of that.
It would be a strange day to resign.
Yeah, exactly. And also a strange way to kick him out, which is
exactly.
probable.
Exactly.
Because as you said, Gallant is in no way in a peace camp or anything like that. He's a right-wing Likud politician, but he has been kind of the voice of reason within the Israeli government in terms of trying to hold them back from doing things that he thinks the country cannot withstand, basically.
Yeah. If you would make the argument that Israel is preparing for an invasion, this is how you would do it, right? You would knock out logistics. And from what I've been hearing, the initial attack, it's not just that they blew up people's pagers, which injured them physically. It's that from that moment, okay, the pager is blown up, then there's a phone call made for an ambulance to come. So then they know where that phone call was placed from. So they know then, like, they can bypass this whole pager thing, and now they know exactly where all the Hezbollah fighters are, essentially. And I think that is quite a common strategy if you're preparing for an invasion: cause complete chaos and panic, moral panic. Obviously, a morale panic, because this is a huge blow against Hezbollah's security infrastructure. I mean, they must be freaking out at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, it's the whole discussion about Hezbollah is how they've built military capabilities over the last couple of decades, and they are seen as a much more capable enemy than Hamas. Now, Hamas is obviously very capable of keeping Israel in a war or locked in a conflict with them, but they're not able to strike at Israel. But very central part of that is obviously Hezbollah is acting in a situation where they know that Israel will strike them at any time, even in the supposed peacetime. So they've been, I mean, being able to build underground or secret installations and a security network is very central to that. And if Israel has actually managed to damage that severely, it will be a huge blow, not just to their personnel, their ability to mobilize at the moment, but also just the structure of how they would communicate and coordinate their resistance. On the other hand, I mean, it's too early to say, but I have a hard time thinking that Lebanese people will be more positively inclined towards Israel. As we've seen for a long time, Hezbollah has been harshly criticized by many Lebanese people, even people who are not particularly pro-Israel or tired of their kind of
Antics.
militant position and antiques, and also in Lebanese domestic politics, of
Yeah.
course, their strong connection to Syria, etc. So I think that might be a reason historically why Hezbollah has been reluctant to drag Lebanon into a war, because they know that they need some kind of tacit support of a majority of Lebanese society to be able to carry that out effectively. I think this is probably something that would move that opinion strongly towards Hezbollah, as
I
you,
think,
you talk
yeah,
about, since it's so indiscriminately will have killed people who are not Hezbollah.
exactly.
Um,
I think that this analysis is twofold, because I completely agree with what you say, but because of the extremely complex and counterintuitive nature of Lebanese sort of sectarian politics,
yeah,
there, I mean, I've seen, analysts, and this is very early on, of course, but say that while people from other sects, okay, so Hezbollah obviously is a Shia-dominated militia group, but people
yep,
who are not necessarily part of Hezbollah will probably rally to them, people from outside of their community, just to show
yep,
this kind of solidarity with them. However, I have seen people say that this will cause a huge rift between Hezbollah and their actual constituent community, which is the Shia, and most of the time the Shia are poor,
mm,
because they look to Hezbollah as like, you protect us, right? This is why we give
right,
you
yep,
so much power over us. This is why we've essentially given you a mandate to build a state within a state. But if you can't do that, then like maybe we're going to lose trust in you. So that could be a kind of a
absolutely.
side show to this whole dynamic that's going on.
The situation in Lebanon is obviously very different from the situation in Gaza, but it has certain similarities in the way that Hamas and Hezbollah both gain within their core constituencies from a confrontation with Israel, because that's what they're seen as. That's their, let's say, core competence, or their focus and what they're good at.
Raison
But on
d'être.
the other hand, of course, it's very important to them that they also manage to show that they can strike back and that they can protect their constituencies. Because if they just look to be weak, they can very easily lose face, let's say, in
I
of
mean,
their.
let's be real. That's happened. They've lost face
Absolutely,
in this.
absolutely. But let's say, so this is, I think, an important aspect of it. But on the other hand, you also have the question we talked about a bit earlier about Galant saying that we should not carry out this war because we don't have the resources to do it. And I think there's a very important aspect of that. If you look at the Israeli army, something that we haven't seen yet so far is starting to happen, namely that they have a lack of soldiers. Of
Yeah.
course, not in absolute terms, because not that many have been killed. I think it's 600 perhaps on 7th of October, and since then 400 or a bit less than that. So it's not the case that Hamas and Hezbollah are killing a lot of Israeli soldiers, but in terms of the fatigue of a somewhat smallish army, really wearing down their own conscripted, usually soldiers. So Israel has been the last couple of days transferring personnel from the Navy to the army, giving them kind of a crash course in how to fight in the army as instead of the Navy. And this is obviously a sign that they are lacking soldiers, which brings us to another important question about Galant and the conflicts within the Israeli army, which is around conscription of ultra-Orthodox Jewish citizens in Israel. Historically, if you're ultra-Orthodox, you're not part of the army, which is really confusing because not all of them, but a huge part of that constituency is very, very supportive of radical, let's say, pro-war policies. But they claim that they're doing the praying and other parts of the Israeli society should do the fighting. So in the last half a year, something like that, they have been changing the law to allow the army to conscript ultra-Orthodox people. And I think many people who listen to this will have seen videos online of ultra-Orthodox men being beaten up by the Israeli army and police. So this is something that's actually, it's not just a political question of like a cultural war where the secular parts of Israeli society want ultra-Orthodox men to do their part. They actually lack soldiers. They need more men, and
Yeah.
they need more convinced, capable people to go into the army. And they've still, I think, not conscripted any of them. They were talking about maybe 20,000 being possible to conscript from that constituency in July. It still doesn't seem to have happened. So I think over the coming months, especially if they get bogged down in Lebanon, it will be a huge strain on Israeli society in terms of actual manpower. Also, we know that, I mean, hundreds of thousands of Israelis have left Israel
Yeah.
since 7th, just because they're not really in it for a war. They want to go there and think it's a great place to stay, spend a couple of years, or perhaps even move from the US mostly. But if it's an actual war zone, they go back.
Yeah, these are people with
So
dual citizenships.
Israelis, and absolutely, which I mean, very many people in Israel have. Um, so yeah, I mean, I'm just saying that this is not just a question of do people in Israel want a war or not, but it's actually a question of can they do this?
Yeah.
Can they
I
manage to
mean,
do it?
there's always the Israeli strategy of extreme deterrence, where
Yeah,
it just tries to show its might and to like sort of flex its muscles as much as possible in order to deter any enemy from daring to strike back at it. And
yeah,
I think this could be an example of that, and it's a bold one, I would say. It's a very bold one because we're not just talking about Hezbollah, we're talking about Iran, and we're talking, there are a lot of different people in play at this moment. But I think there is something to say about following an Israeli logic, which would be, look, we now blew up people's pagers in their pockets from
yeah.
Tel Aviv. Like, don't mess with us.
We can do anything.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and I think they're banking on that. And the question
probably.
is, we'll probably see in the next 24 hours. Um,
Absolutely.
although I don't want to
It's
make any
either that, it's
predictions.
either that, or they're planning for a major
Yeah,
invasion or major attack, and this is a preparatory straight
yeah,
stage. You might see something happening during the night, in which case our listeners will know more than
exactly.
we do.
Yeah, but
But I think it's also a question of just talking about, as you said, about Iran, perhaps even Syria. They are okay, quote unquote, with carrying out horrible, attack, which makes them lose face. To a certain extent, they're okay with it because they know that they have Hezbollah, and Israel will be constrained to some extent by
yeah,
the fact they know that Israel will know that they will have to enter in a very serious all-out war with a capable enemy. If those forces or those powers feel that Israel has perhaps undermined Hezbollah's capability for the foreseeable, or for the next couple of weeks, for example, they will be in a much more stressed out situation. It's not exactly the same, but it's a bit like a nuclear deterrence strategy.
yeah,
As long
yeah,
as
yeah,
one knows that the other side can't do whatever they want because they will have to pay a price, it also makes the system, weirdly enough, it makes it more stable. But if
yeah,
that deterrence seems to be uh, fracturing, then that might also make things much more, let's say, unpredictable from both sides.
yeah. Maybe we should end it there and not say too much before, considering the fact
Not
that this is
embarrass
coming.
ourselves in the eyes
Yeah,
of
yeah,
our.
yeah. I can just say something that's happening now as I'm watching TV live, that the U.S. State Department, this one of their spokespersons is making a statement as we speak, and what he's saying essentially is that the U.S. had no role in this attack,
In this.
which is
Yeah.
not. I mean, he would say that obviously, but yeah. So they're this is a huge
He
thing.
wouldn't,
Everyone
yeah,
is
he would never take responsibility, but he would also try to, he wouldn't out the fact that the Israelis did this against our wishes, which is
yeah,
basically.
yeah, exactly.
Also, just earlier today, this was something that I was going to mention, but that kind of dropped out of the focus here, is the US has warned against an escalation, saying that we will not accept this,
Yeah,
not accept war with Lebanon, and we all know that that is seems to have very little effect on this current government of Israel. And Netanyahu said on this specific topic, this is a direct quote, Israel appreciates and respects the support of the United States, but ultimately it will do what is necessary to ensure its security.
yeah.
It seems to be what they've been
It's a
up
fancy
to.
way of saying "fuck you," essentially.
Perhaps
Okay,
that's a
well,
more succinct way to
thank
put
you,
it.
Sam, for joining me on this dramatic evening on the
Yes.
17th of September. This will be
Thank you,
coming
Edgar.
out the morning of the 18th. We hope that this is still relevant by then.
Yeah. Thank you, Edgar.